It was just a trip to the grocery store. But when 72-year-old William Lockhart sees a man he buried with his own hands in 1972, he's forced to confront a question no one can answer. How do you catch a ghost that bleeds? It was supposed to be just another Tuesday. 72-year-old William Lockhart woke up at precisely 6:03 a.m., just as he had every day for the past 12 years. No alarm. No reason to rush. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, letting the stiffness in his joints remind him that time was no longer a distant concept, it was here, wearing down his knees and echoing in the crackle of his bones. If this story moved you, consider subscribing. Not every truth comes with closure, but every view, every like, helps more stories like this be heard. And if you've ever lost someone the world forgot, leave a comment. We read every one. The kettle clicked on in the kitchen. William didn't believe in coffee pods or fancy grinders. He brewed his coffee with a simple pour-over kettle, the kind you'd see in black and white military footage from the 1950s. 2 spoons of sugar. 1 dash of cream. He stirred slowly, watching the swirl as if it held the secrets to the day. He fed Jasper, his aging orange tabby, and settled into the recliner by the window. The Detroit skyline was visible in the distance, a jagged line of glass and steel pushing against a bruised gray sky. It was cloudy again. It had been for days. He opened the paper. Vietnam Commemoration Ceremony to be held at Capitol Steps, May 15th. He exhaled through his nose. Closed the page. He wouldn't be going. William had long since stopped attending those events. Not because he didn't care. Because he cared too much. Every folded flag and speech about valor made something tighten in his chest. Something unspeakable. The kind of pain you don't explain, you bury it. Like they buried Eli Mercer. They'd been inseparable. Since elementary school. 2 kids from the same blue-collar neighborhood. Baseball gloves on handlebars. Stickball in alleyways. Even their enlistment had been joint, same recruiter, same training base, same platoon. Vietnam had chewed them both up, but only spit one of them back out. April 17, 1972. That date was etched in William's mind like a branding iron. That was the night the jungle exploded. That was the night the ambush happened. That was the night William had carried Eli's limp, bloody body through the mud, wrapped it in a rain poncho, and helped dig a shallow grave outside Firebase Bronson. He hadn't just lost Eli. He'd buried him. With his own hands. So when William walked into Stover's Market that afternoon to pick up instant oatmeal and saw Eli Mercer standing 3 feet from the canned soup display, alive and well, comparing 2 brands of tomato bisque, his entire world collapsed inward like a house with no foundation. The man turned slightly, unaware of William's stare. His profile. The line of his jaw. The scar under his eye. No. It's impossible. But his brain didn't care what was possible. His instincts knew what they saw. William reached out blindly, placing a hand on the edge of a freezer to steady himself. He felt dizzy. He couldn't breathe. A sound caught in his throat but never made it to the air. The man glanced over. Polite. Neutral. Sir. Are you all right? That voice. William's knees buckled. He didn't fall, but only just. He muttered something, he didn't even know what, and turned, leaving his shopping cart behind as he shuffled down the aisle, out the sliding doors, and into the parking lot where his truck waited like a lifeboat in a storm. He sat in the cab for what felt like an hour, hands trembling, staring at nothing. That night, he didn't sleep. He pulled out the shoebox from under his bed. The one he hadn't touched in over 20 years. Inside were letters. Dog tags. A pocket-sized copy of the New Testament. An old Zippo with a bullet dent in the side. And a photograph. A grainy, Sun-bleached photo of 6 soldiers with dirt on their cheeks and sweat-stained shirts, standing in front of a Huey chopper. One of them had his arm around William's shoulder. Eli Mercer. William ran a thumb across the photo. His hands were calloused and knotted now, but back then they'd been strong. Steady. Back then he could carry a man on his back through jungle mud and monsoon rain. He remembered how Eli laughed. Loud and reckless. The kind of laugh that echoed in tents and foxholes and cut through the fear like a blade. That laugh died in 1972. Didn't it? The next day, William went back to Stover's. And the day after. He didn't know what he was looking for exactly. Proof he was crazy. Proof he wasn't. The man didn't appear again for 5 days. When he did, he was wearing a navy windbreaker and holding a reusable shopping bag. He moved slowly, with a limp William recognized. The left leg, Eli had taken shrapnel there in Da Nang. William watched from behind the end-cap display of energy drinks. He didn't approach. Not yet. His heart thundered like mortar fire in his chest. The man paid in cash. Walked out with 2 bags. Turned west on Delaney Street. William followed. He stayed half a block behind, watching the man's gait. The way he rubbed his neck with one hand when he was deep in thought. It was him. It had to be. The man stopped in front of a 3-story apartment building. Painted green. Rust on the stair rails. Door 3B. He unlocked it and vanished inside. William stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes. Then he went home. The idea of knocking on that door gnawed at William like rust on old steel. He paced his apartment all night, replaying every frame of what he'd seen. The limp. The voice. The face. The dead face. He thought about calling someone, maybe Glenn, his old squad medic, now living in Chicago. But how do you begin that conversation? Hey, Glenn. Remember Eli? I think I just saw him buying soup. No. This wasn't something you called someone about. This was something you faced. Alone. The next morning, he wore his army jacket. Not for comfort. For armor. He walked the 3 blocks in silence. Every step felt heavier than the last. By the time he stood outside apartment 3B, he was shaking. He raised his fist. And knocked. The door opened slowly. The man, Eli, stood there in a gray t-shirt and sweatpants. His expression was neutral at first. But then he blinked. Tilted his head. William nearly collapsed. His name. Out loud. From that voice. Jesus Christ, the man whispered. I thought you were dead. William gripped the doorframe. I thought you were dead, Eli. There was a beat of silence. Then Eli stepped aside. You better come in. The apartment was small. Lived in. A bookshelf filled with war novels and westerns. A framed photo of a dog long gone. A table with 2 chairs. Nothing fancy. Just, real. Eli moved like someone who had survived something most people couldn't even imagine. His steps were measured. His eyes carried shadows. He poured 2 cups of coffee. They sat across from each other. Neither drank. You were dead, William said. It wasn't a question. Eli nodded slowly. I should have been. And so the story came out. April 17, 1972. Firebase Bronson. The ambush had been worse than anyone reported. After the initial explosion, William had blacked out. When he came to, Eli was gone. His unit found a body the next day, badly burned, missing tags, but dressed in Eli's uniform. They buried him. Eli nodded. That body wasn't me. Then who the hell was it? William asked, his voice low. I don't know. Maybe a replacement who took my jacket. Maybe one of our guys who crawled into the wrong trench. I was unconscious. I don't even remember the first week after. He looked down into his coffee. I woke up in a bamboo cage. The next part came slowly. Painfully. Eli had been a POW, held deep in Laos by a rogue militia group. Not officially acknowledged. No record. The kind of place even the CIA didn't admit existed. He escaped twice. Recaptured both times. The third time, he didn't run, he waited. Months later, American operatives found him during a black ops sweep. By then he was 40 pounds underweight and barely recognizable. He smiled bitterly. They called me a security risk. Said I'd been exposed to enemy intelligence. Said my knowledge made me dangerous. William frowned. Dangerous to who? To them, Eli said. I wasn't just a prisoner. I'd overheard things. Things about American operations in Cambodian territory. Stuff they weren't supposed to be doing. They didn't want a soldier with a memory that's sharp going home. So they made him vanish. Why now? William finally asked. Why not contact me? Or your family? Eli sighed. They threatened to disappear me again. Told me I'd never see sunlight if I interfered with official narratives. They relocated me 3 times. Watched my mail. Listened to phone calls. They let up 5 years ago. But by then, everyone I knew had moved on. Or moved away. He looked up at William. I went to your house once. Saw you mowing the lawn. I froze. Then I left. William's mouth opened in disbelief. You saw me. I was scared, Will. What if you didn't believe me? What if you were part of it? William's face darkened. I buried you. Eli nodded. I know. The silence that followed was like molasses, thick and slow. Then William leaned forward. What do you want me to do with this? I don't know, Eli said honestly. I just didn't want to be invisible anymore. William stood. Walked to the window. Outside, kids played hopscotch. An old man pushed a shopping cart filled with cans. Life kept moving. But something inside him had stopped. He turned back. I need proof. That afternoon, they drove. 3 hours west, past Lansing, into rural Michigan. To a cabin. Inside a locked drawer, Eli pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it. Inside were photographs. Dog tags. A sealed letter marked, to be delivered only if I die again. William picked up one photo. It was Eli, bearded, gaunt, surrounded by men in uniforms not American. One had an AK-47 slung over his shoulder. They never found this camp, Eli said. We buried it ourselves when we escaped. I went back for these 6 years ago. William examined the dog tags. Mercer, Elijah T. O. 378-592-110. A POS. U.S. Army. Authentic. Worn. And very, very real. That night, William couldn't sleep. His world had turned inside out. His best friend was back from the dead. The only question was, what now? William had always believed truth was like a river. No matter how many dams you built or how far you diverted it underground, it would find a way back to daylight. But as he sat in his apartment, staring at the photographs and documents Eli had entrusted him with, he realized something deeper. Truth didn't just resurface. Sometimes, it needed to be dug out. And that meant paperwork. William hadn't touched his military files in years. Not since his last VA benefits update, which had been more trouble than it was worth. The boxes were stored in a locked chest in the hallway closet, buried under toolkits, winter blankets, and memories he preferred not to remember. He laid everything out on the dining table. His discharge papers. Service medals. A yellowed folder labeled Operation Iron Palm. He opened it. Flipped through. Eli's name was there. Then crossed out in red pen. Kia. Killed in action. April 17, 1972. That wasn't surprising. What was surprising were the marginal notes on the next page, coded references, black marker redactions, and a strange entry. Mercer incident resolved. Body accounted for, see ref. File 7Q, ghost. Report to be buried per CO authorization. Buried. Not filed. Not classified. Buried. William blinked. That was not standard language. Even in his years of service, he had never seen phrasing like that. Something was off. The next day, he went to the VA records office in downtown Detroit. He hadn't been there in over a decade. The place hadn't changed much. Same beige walls. Same underpaid clerks. Same smell of printer toner and burnt coffee. He approached the window. The woman behind the glass barely looked up. Form. Not yet, William said. I'm looking for a personnel file. Historical request. She slid a clipboard toward him. You'll need to fill this out and bring a copy of the DD-214. I've got it, he said, handing over his discharge paper. Name, William Lockhart. Serial, 218-774-366. Unit, 3rd Infantry, Charlie Company. And the file I'm requesting is for a soldier in my unit, he added. Name was Eli Mercer. The woman frowned slightly. Family member. Close as blood. She tapped something into the computer. Paused. Typed again. Then again. Finally, she looked up. There's no file. William blinked. What? Nothing under that name. No record of service. Nothing matching that serial. That can't be. He was in my platoon. We did basic together. She shrugged, the way only bureaucrats could. If it's not in the system, it doesn't exist. On the way out, William didn't go home. He went to Fort McClellan Archives, a 3-hour drive and a favor owed by an old army buddy who still worked logistics. The place was less like a military base and more like a dead museum. Long halls filled with cabinets. Paper instead of screens. The past stored in boxes. The man behind the desk was gruff, but friendly. Mercer, Eli, he repeated, flipping through a directory. Yeah. I remember something weird about that one. His file was pulled in the late 80s. Reassigned to Intel, they said. But it was strange. Strange how? No forwarding code. Usually when a file gets reassigned, it's tagged. CIA, NSA, DoD. Something. But his just disappeared. William felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Confirmation. Something was being kept quiet. He looked down at the list of service members from Firebase Bronson. There was a mark next to Eli's name. A red asterisk. No key. No legend. Just a star. That night, William met Eli in his apartment again. He laid everything out on the table. I checked VA. You don't exist. Eli nodded. I figured. I went to McClellan. Same thing. File gone. Reassigned, no trace. Eli leaned back, sighing. They weren't just hiding me. They were erasing me. William leaned forward. You said you heard things in that camp. What things? Eli hesitated. Then, quietly, CIA-funded operations. Deep in Cambodia. Not just surveillance. Raids. On civilians. Villages burned. Intel gathered. Why? Communist sympathizers. Resource control. Some said it was a preemptive measure for China. William's eyes widened. You saw this? I was there, Will. They interrogated prisoners in the next cage. One of them spilled names. Units. Ops. The soldiers weren't North Vietnamese. They spoke English. I think they were American. You think? Eli looked up. I know. There was a long pause. William stood, pacing the room. Then he stopped. Do you want to tell this story? Eli looked confused. To who? To everyone. William didn't sleep that night either. Instead, he opened his laptop for the first time in 3 weeks. Typed. My name is William Lockhart. I served in the U.S. Army from 1969 to 1973. This is the story of the man we all thought died in Vietnam, and what the government did to keep him dead. He hit save. Then he picked up the phone. William Lockhart was not the kind of man who made waves. He followed rules. Paid his taxes. Saluted the flag even when he didn't agree with what it stood for anymore. But what do you do when the government you once served spends 5 decades pretending your best friend never existed? You stop saluting. You start talking. And you pray someone listens. The email was short. Direct. My name is William Lockhart. I have a story that involves a U.S. soldier officially declared Kia in 1972, now alive, with documents and photographic proof. This is not fiction. This is a whistleblower report. I'm willing to talk. Attached, photo scans. Dog tag images. Redacted files. Subject, Operation Iron Palm / Firebase Bronson. Contact, 313-555-0176". He sent it to 12 journalists. 6 ignored him. 3 replied with generic, "Thank you for your submission" messages. 2 asked for more detail, then disappeared once he sent it. 1, Hannah Greer, an investigative journalist for a small but scrappy outlet in Baltimore, responded differently. She called. Hannah was 32. Razor sharp. Suspicious by trade. She didn't ask soft questions. Her first was, "Why now?" William answered honestly. "Because the man I buried is alive. And if I don't do something, they'll bury him again. For real this time." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm booking a flight." 3 days later, she sat in William's living room. Recorder on. Notebook out. Eyes locked on his. "I've seen some crazy stories," she said. Staged deaths. CIA black sites. Whistleblowers forced into hiding. But I've never had a walking, talking ghost sitting one neighborhood over. William nodded slowly. "This one never stopped haunting me." He introduced her to Eli. At first, Eli was hesitant. Distrustful. But as William stood beside him, silent, steady, Eli began to talk. Hannah recorded for 6 hours. Camp locations. Names of guards. American accents behind enemy uniforms. The interrogations. The medical experiments. "I was a test subject," Eli admitted. "They injected us with something. Claimed it was antibiotics. But one guy went blind. Another started hallucinating. I woke up with bruises I couldn't explain." She paused the recorder. "Were these American scientists?" "I don't know. They wore masks. But the boots were American military issue. The gloves had U.S. stamps. One guy dropped a clipboard, his notes were in English. William watched her eyes narrow. She wasn't just listening. She was calculating risk. The next morning, Hannah uploaded everything to an encrypted drive. She made copies. Then she sent the files, under fake names, to 3 trusted journalists. Insurance, she said. If I disappear, this doesn't. William raised an eyebrow. You think they'll come for us? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The story broke 10 days later. Not on CNN. Not on Fox. Not even on mainstream news. It hit the internet like a match in dry grass. Man declared dead in Vietnam appears alive 51 years later, with evidence of CIA abuse and cover-up. At first, people thought it was a hoax. But then the images came out. The dog tags. The matching fingerprints. The pre-1972 photograph, side by side with a new one taken by Hannah on her phone. Same man. Same scar. Same voice. Government officials refused to comment. The VA said the file appears to have been misfiled and is under review. The DoD offered no response. The CIA issued a single-line statement. We are not aware of any such operations. That was it. But then something happened that no one expected. Other voices started to speak. An email from a former Marine. Then a message from a nurse stationed in Laos. Then an anonymous voicemail from a man with a gravelly voice. I was in that camp too. I saw what they did. I have pictures. You're not crazy, Mercer. They just made us feel like we were. One by one, others came forward. The dots began to connect. Camp names matched. Injection symptoms aligned. Even the strange red asterisk next to Eli's name on the Firebase Bronson log appeared in 3 other unrelated files. The government couldn't bury it this time. There were too many shovels digging it back up. But exposure comes with a cost. 3 days after the story went viral, William's house was broken into. Nothing was stolen. Just, disturbed. Cabinets open. Papers shuffled. The shoebox was gone. His copy of Eli's dog tags. Gone too. But whoever did it left one thing behind. A matchbox. Plain black. Inside, a single bullet. And a note. Ghosts aren't meant to live twice. William called Hannah. She arrived within hours. This is real, she said, holding the note with gloved fingers. Someone's watching. Not just watching, William said grimly. They're warning. He looked out the window. Across the street, a black sedan sat idle. Same one that had passed his house twice in the last hour. His voice hardened. Let them watch. They moved Eli that night. Not to a hotel. To a safe house, arranged through a contact Hannah had in federal witness protection. No names. No paper trail. Burner phones only. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in 51 years, Eli Mercer wasn't hiding because he was told to. He was hiding because the truth was too loud to silence now. And the world? The world was finally listening. The headstone was exactly as he remembered it. Weather-worn granite. Simple engraving. Elijah Thomas Mercer. 1949 to 1972. Gone but not forgotten. William stood silently in the morning fog, hands in his coat pockets. The cemetery was empty except for a few squirrels darting through frostbitten grass. It felt colder than usual. Not from the wind. From the knowledge that the grave in front of him might be empty. Or worse, buried with the wrong man. 2 days after the break-in, William filed a request with the VA and the Michigan Office of Veteran Affairs to exhume the remains. At first, the response was polite. Then dismissive. Then hostile. Grave records are sealed. There is no documented cause to initiate exhumation. Do not contact this office again regarding this matter. It was clear they weren't going to cooperate. So William made another call, to Joseph Alvarez, a retired judge who had once been stationed in Vietnam himself. He owed William a favor. Two, actually. Alvarez filed an emergency petition for exhumation in Wayne County Court. 3 weeks later, the order was approved. The body would be exhumed. Hannah was there. So was Eli, though he stayed in the car, hood pulled low, eyes scanning the cemetery through a cracked window. William watched as 2 workers carefully lifted the stone and began digging. The dirt came out in muted thuds. It took over an hour. And then, they hit something. A flash of dull silver. The edge of a military casket. William's breath caught. This was it. The coroner opened the casket. Inside was a body, still in a decayed army uniform. Skull mostly intact. Bone structure still present. But unidentifiable by sight. No dog tags. No dental chart. No fingerprint record. They would need DNA. Back in Detroit, a lab technician took samples from the remains and ran them against Eli's living DNA. The results came in 10 days later. William opened the envelope with shaking hands. Conclusion. No genetic match found. Remains are not those of Elijah Thomas Mercer. Subject unknown. Eli sat across from him, silent. He stared at the paper. Then laughed, a dry, broken laugh. All this time, he muttered. They buried someone else under my name. And the world moved on. William said nothing. What could he say? What do you say to a man who's been erased so thoroughly, even his grave was a lie? The headlines came next. Man declared Kia in 1972 proven not to be buried in his own grave. DNA confirms, Vietnam POW was never recovered, because he was never lost. The ghost soldier, national debate sparks over exhumed grave. Congress couldn't ignore it now. A special committee was formed to investigate. C-SPAN began airing hearings. Eli's name was trending. Hashtag Mercer Files. Hashtag Ghost Soldier. Hashtag Forgotten Veterans. But fame was never what Eli wanted. He didn't care about hashtags. He wanted one thing, his name back. It wasn't simple. The Army resisted. The VA dodged. The Department of Defense issued a memo that basically said, "We're looking into it." Meanwhile, William contacted a civil rights attorney. Together, they filed a petition for reinstatement of identity, an unprecedented request that demanded a correction to Eli Mercer's status from Kia to recovered alive. Full veteran benefits restored. Recognition of unlawful detainment and psychological trauma. Removal of the grave listing his name. Formal public apology from the Department of Defense. The court date was set for June 9, 2024. The night before, William found Eli sitting in the backyard, under a sky full of stars. He was smoking. He rarely smoked anymore. "You nervous?" William asked. Eli exhaled. "Not really." William nodded. They sat in silence. Then Eli whispered, "You know what the worst part was, back in that camp?" William shook his head. "Not the beatings. Not the hunger. Not even the loneliness." He turned, eyes distant. "It was the silence. Knowing the world thought I was dead. That my mother cried at a folded flag while I sat in a cage thousands of miles away." William swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." Eli nodded. "Me too." The next day, Eli wore his uniform to court. It didn't fit like it used to, but he wore it anyway. As he stood before the judge, flanked by William and their attorney, he held his head high. "I served this country. I fought for it. I bled for it. And then it buried me alive. The courtroom was silent. The judge stared for a long time. Then she said, "Mr. Mercer, on behalf of this country, I'm sorry." She banged the gavel. And just like that, the ghost had a name again. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones. Cameras. Questions. Eli said one thing before stepping away. "I'm not a ghost. I'm proof. Proof that the truth will surface, no matter how deep you bury it." Some stories change lives. This one began changing institutions. The ruling in Eli's case didn't just make headlines, it cracked the surface of decades-old silence. Suddenly, other families with long-missing soldiers were asking the same question. Are we sure? Within 2 weeks of the hearing, Congress received over 2,000 petitions requesting reinvestigations into declared Kias from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. More than 300 involved soldiers listed as presumed dead, body not recovered. The Department of Veterans Affairs was overwhelmed. The Department of Defense issued a formal statement. "We are initiating a comprehensive audit of unidentified Vietnam War remains." Behind the scenes, panic spread like wildfire through military bureaucracy. The unspoken fear. What if Eli wasn't the only one? Hannah Greer, now a household name, launched a full-scale investigation through her outlet. Her new series, The Forgotten Files, featured weekly interviews with families, retired soldiers, and experts in intelligence operations. In one episode, a former NSA analyst, blurred face, disguised voice, said this. "We knew. Not about Eli, specifically. But about others. The Cold War justified a lot of ugliness. Files were hidden. Mistakes were covered. Names were erased for national security." When asked how many names, he answered. Hundreds. Meanwhile, William and Eli found themselves in the heart of a media storm. News crews camped outside William's house. A documentary crew pitched a multi-part series. A publisher offered a 6-figure book deal. William declined all of it. "We didn't do this to be famous," he told Eli one night over tea. "We did it because it was right." Eli smiled faintly. "I never thought justice would be so noisy. But the noise brought danger." One night, around 2 a.m., a brick shattered the window of William's truck. Taped to it, a strip of military-issue duct tape with one word scrawled in permanent marker. Enough. They didn't report it. They'd learned by now the people behind threats like that didn't leave fingerprints. Instead, they dug deeper. Eli and Hannah began working with a group of retired military archivists, gray-haired men and women who still believed in honor, even if the institution that trained them didn't. One name kept surfacing. Project Vulture. According to buried memos, it was a clandestine detainment program authorized in 1971. Its aim? Capture, isolate, and study American soldiers who had been presumed Kia but were found alive in unauthorized zones. Why? Theories ranged from psychological warfare to bioweapons testing. Some said it was simple paranoia, fear that captured soldiers had been brainwashed or compromised. Whatever the reason, the files were chilling. One document listed 10 names under the header, classified, not to return. Next to each, a red dot. All presumed dead. All without recovered bodies. All, like Eli. Hannah published the findings. The public reaction was nuclear. Protests erupted outside Pentagon buildings. Veterans from multiple wars marched in solidarity. The president was forced to issue a statement. "We must reckon with the failures of the past." The treatment of Sergeant Elijah Mercer was inexcusable. "The steps we take now must ensure such erasure never happens again." A new congressional subcommittee formed. The Select Committee on Forgotten Servicemen. Eli and William were invited to testify. The room was packed. News crews. Families. Lawmakers. William sat beside Eli, a steady presence as always. This time, Eli wasn't shaky. He wasn't scared. He looked into the cameras and said, "They told me to stay invisible. But I survived. And if I survived, so did others. And if you're watching this right now, if your brother, your father, your son was never found, don't assume he's gone. Dig. Ask. Demand. Because I was never supposed to come home either." After the hearing, people began showing up at William's door. A woman from Oregon with her father's dog tags. A man from Georgia who'd found a journal in an attic. A teenager from Philadelphia whose uncle had vanished during a recon mission near the Cambodian border. Each one with a story. Each one with a name. Eli spoke to every one of them. Patiently. Kindly. Truthfully. Then came the unexpected letter. A handwritten envelope, no return address. Inside, a single piece of lined paper, folded 3 times. Eli. I was there. You weren't the only one. They're still watching. Stay quiet, or they'll find us again. J. Eli read it twice. Then burned it. He didn't tell William until 2 days later. William didn't ask why. He knew the past had ghosts. But so did the present. One night, as fall settled over Michigan and the leaves turned brittle and red, William sat on the porch with Eli. Jasper the cat lounged on the railing, purring. Hannah had gone back to Baltimore, but her work was still everywhere. William sipped his tea. You think it's over? He asked quietly. Eli took a long breath. No. But it started. In a locked drawer in a windowless room buried inside the National Archives, a file sat untouched for 48 years. Its label. Classified, Eyes Only, Operation Vulture. Subheader. Non-recoverables, N/R, Psychological Holding Protocols. It was never meant to be found. But it was. By a librarian. Maya Thompson was 26 years old, fresh out of graduate school, and 2 months into her job when she came across the file while reorganizing a mislabeled cart of old microfilm reels. She didn't recognize the label at first. But she remembered the headlines. Eli Mercer. Ghost Soldier. Whistleblower. The words on the folder matched a keyword she'd seen trending, non-recoverables. She scanned the first few pages. Names. Serial numbers. Coordinates. Some notes scribbled in shaky, rushed handwriting. Hashtag 04, transferred to Laos compound July 1973. Number 06, unfit for reintegration. Number 07, detained indefinitely pending conditioning assessment. Each entry ended with the same stamp. Do not return. Maya broke protocol. She took photos. Then deleted them from her phone. Then retook them on an offline camera. Then printed them at home. Then mailed them, to only one person. Hannah Greer. 2 days later, Hannah sat across from Eli and William in the living room, her hands trembling slightly as she spread out the pages. There were 23 names on the list. Eli's was 4th. But the other names? Unknown to the public. Unaccounted for in DoD archives. And still marked as Kia. Eli stared at the pages for a long time. Then pointed at one name. James Holler, he said. I knew him. We were in the same cage for 6 months. William leaned in. You sure? Eli nodded. Positive. He had a birthmark on his left cheek. Sang old country songs at night. Another name. Peter Ramos. We called him Razor. He escaped in 74. I never knew what happened after that. And then a final name, near the bottom. Hashtag 21, Tyler Vance, under watch/condition/mobile. Eli's face darkened. I know him too. But he wasn't like the rest. They spent the next 10 days digging. Hannah traced Peter Ramos to an abandoned mobile home in Nevada. No one had lived there in years. But an elderly woman nearby said she'd seen someone coming and going at odd hours. He walks funny, she said. Like his legs forgot how to be legs. In Georgia, a woman filed a missing persons report in 1994 for her father, Tyler Vance, former Green Beret. The file was closed without explanation. William contacted Maya anonymously. She confirmed the document's authenticity. And warned them. I've already been questioned. Someone knows I opened that drawer. Hannah wrote the piece in secret. No drafts saved to the cloud. No leaks. No previews. No publisher approval. She called it the missing list. She released it at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 8 a.m., it had over 1.2 million views. The fallout was immediate. Congress reopened investigations. The president formed a Veterans Recovery Task Force. The CIA denied involvement. But this time, no one believed them. Not even their own retired analysts. One former intelligence officer went live on national television and said, "Yes. The list is real. I signed off on it. We were told it was about national security. Now I'm not sure it wasn't about silence." The Mercer hearings began in November. For the first time in U.S. history, a panel of former soldiers gave public testimony about secret detainment, drug testing, and psychological manipulation on American soil. William testified too. His voice was calm. Measured. But one line became a rallying cry. I buried a man in 1972. And then I saw him buying soup in aisle 4. You want to talk about ghosts? They're not under beds. They're in filing cabinets. Public sentiment shifted. Not just for Eli. But for every name on the list. Families of the other 22 were contacted. 4 were still living. 3 were too far gone, mentally or physically broken. 1 refused to speak. But 2 agreed to meet Eli. They met in a quiet park near Lake Huron. James Holler walked with a cane and trembled when he spoke. But when he saw Eli, he dropped the cane and embraced him with both arms. They told me you died, he whispered. They told me you did, Eli replied. That night, William watched from the porch as the 2 men sat on folding chairs by the water, their silhouettes small against the massive sky. He thought about all the years lost. All the birthdays missed. All the graves marked by mistake. He looked down at Jasper, curled near his feet. Then up at the stars. I hope the right people are watching now, he said aloud. Behind him, Eli stood in the doorway. They are, he said. Some of them just don't know it yet. It began with a knock on the door. Not loud. Not rushed. Just, deliberate. William opened it to find a man in a charcoal gray suit, clean-shaven, polite smile, eyes like polished glass. Mr. Lockhart? Yes. My name is Agent Caldwell. I represent a federal joint task force working on veteran recovery and intelligence declassification. May I come in? William didn't move. You hear about Eli? The man paused, then nodded. Yes. But I'm here to talk to you. They sat across from each other. No notes. No recorder. Just 2 cups of coffee, untouched. Agent Caldwell leaned forward. There's a lot of momentum building. A lot of public energy around your story. Around Mercer. William said nothing. We're looking for resolution. Quiet resolution. Before it spirals into something that weakens national cohesion. There it was. Control in the name of stability. What exactly are you offering? William asked. Caldwell folded his hands. A formal acknowledgement of Eli Mercer's survival. Reintegration package. Full back pay, benefits, property trust, and a new start, under conditions of limited public exposure going forward. William raised an eyebrow. Gag order? Caldwell smiled thinly. We call it a non-disruption clause. William stood. Tell your people we're not for sale. Caldwell stood too. You misunderstand, Mr. Lockhart. This isn't a threat. It's a lifeline. This gets bigger, it doesn't stop with hearings. You think the CIA will take this lying down? You think the Pentagon will admit 30 years of secret prisons? William stared at him. They already have. Caldwell's smile disappeared. They haven't even started. He left a business card on the table. If you change your mind. Then he was gone. William told Eli everything. Eli didn't seem surprised. They want to bury it again, he said. Only this time, I'd be alive. But invisible. Hannah arrived an hour later. After hearing the story, she said, you know this was just the first pass. They'll come again. Louder. Eli nodded. And for the first time in weeks, he looked tired. That night, William found Eli sitting on the porch, staring into the dark. Do you ever think we made a mistake? Eli asked. William sat beside him. You mean by telling the truth? Eli nodded. William shook his head slowly. No. The mistake was letting them lie this long. The next week, Caldwell returned. But not alone. This time, with a woman, sharp suit, silver pin, carried herself like a senator's handler. They didn't wait for an invitation. We're here to offer a revised arrangement, she said. This time, it wasn't about hiding Eli. It was about using him. You'll be a symbol, she explained. A survivor. A hero. We'll frame it as a mistake that's now been corrected. You'll speak publicly, but only with our speechwriters. Your story will be featured, but the version we craft. Eli asked, what do I get in return? She smiled. Everything. Recognition. Restoration. Even the Presidential Medal of Freedom. William stepped forward. And what do we not say? The woman's eyes hardened. No mention of Project Vulture. No mention of other names. No suggestion this was systemic. You were a singular tragedy. Nothing more. Eli didn't answer her. He turned to William. Let's take a walk. They walked down the street in silence. Autumn leaves scraped along the sidewalk like whispers. Finally, Eli said, they want my story, but not my truth. William nodded. They want to turn you into a statue. And then silence the sculptor. Eli looked up at the stars. Let's give them something they can't edit. That night, Eli recorded a video. No script. No polish. Just him, sitting at William's kitchen table, looking into a webcam. My name is Elijah Thomas Mercer. In 1972, I was captured. In 1973, I was erased. In 2025, they offered to make me famous, as long as I stopped being honest. But I didn't survive a cage, 30 years of silence, and a false grave to become a mascot. If they want a symbol, they can have this. Truth isn't negotiable. The video went viral overnight. 7.4 million views in 24 hours. Hashtag not a figurehead. Hashtag Mercer speaks. Hashtag full truth only. The next day, Caldwell returned again. This time, he didn't ask to come inside. You made your choice, he said. Just understand, so will we. He got into the car and drove away. Eli watched him go. William looked at his friend. You think that's a threat? Eli smiled. No. That's panic. The call came from Nevada. A voice, old, shaking, filtered through a storm of static. You don't know me, the man said. But I saw your video. I think I found something. It's in the desert. West of Hawthorne. An unmarked grave. William asked who he was. The voice paused. Name's Amos Dryden. I used to guard them. The camps. We were told not to ask names. But I remember one of them. Red hair. Said his name was Ramos. Said he was with a guy named Mercer. Eli froze. Peter Ramos, he whispered. The voice replied, I don't know. I just know I didn't want him to be forgotten. I marked the place. Been waiting for someone to care enough to call. Click. They drove out 2 days later. William, Eli, Hannah, and a cameraman. Hawthorne, Nevada was small. Dry. Quiet. Amos met them in a worn hat and older eyes. He didn't ask for attention. He didn't want thanks. Just walked. They hiked 5 miles into the desert. No trail. Just wind, rocks, and memory. Finally, Amos stopped. There. Half buried in the sand, a metal plate. William brushed it off. Underneath, a shallow rectangle of disturbed ground. Eli knelt beside it. This is it, he said. I feel it. They exhumed the body quietly. No press. No announcements. A single skeleton, wrapped in remnants of fatigues. No tags. But a metal lighter tucked in the shirt pocket. Etched with the letters, RZ. Razor. Peter Ramos. Eli didn't cry. He sat down, legs crossed in the dirt, staring at the bones like he owed them something. William stood nearby, silent. Finally, Eli said, he tried to escape. I heard him screaming. I thought maybe he made it. William knelt beside him. He did. Just not far. They buried Ramos again. Properly this time. Military honors. Press was invited. Hannah's crew documented everything. A new headstone was raised. PFC Peter Razor Ramos. Born, 1950, died, unknown. Found, 2025. We remember what they tried to erase. The government offered to take over the ceremony. Eli refused. He gave the eulogy himself. I knew this man in a cage. He made me laugh when my voice was gone. He shared rice when there wasn't enough. They tried to bury him in sand. Now we bury him in truth. Later that week, Eli received a package. No name. Inside, a USB drive. William plugged it into his laptop. One folder. Dozens of files. Photos. Videos. Names. One stood out. A grainy photo of a young man in uniform. Date, 1974. Location, unknown. File name, Vance_log_79. Eli leaned in. That's Tyler. William frowned. The man from the list? Eli nodded. He's not dead. The man in the photo had the same eyes. Even through the pixelation, even after 50 years, Eli knew. Tyler Vance, he said again. He wasn't like the rest of us. He adapted. I think they broke him. William looked over Eli's shoulder. Then why send us this? If he's alive, and he's with them, why warn us? Eli didn't answer right away. Because the answer was too uncomfortable to speak. The metadata on the USB led them to a single ISP in rural Montana. A cabin. Off-grid. Registered to no one. They flew out 2 days later. Hannah stayed behind to coordinate media silence. The fewer people who knew, the safer this trip would be. Snow had begun to dust the hills. William knocked first. No answer. He knocked again, then noticed the door wasn't locked. It creaked open. Inside, bookshelves, military gear, a gas heater, and a single photograph on the mantel. Eli and Tyler. 1971. The place wasn't empty. Footsteps upstairs. William reached for the bat they'd brought, just in case. Then a voice drifted down. Flat. Rusty. Fragile. Mercer. Eli froze. He hadn't heard that voice in over 50 years. Tyler Vance descended the stairs slowly. He looked like a man built out of wire and willpower. Thin. Pale. Eyes too alert. Didn't think I'd ever see you again, he said. Eli stepped forward. We thought you were dead. Tyler half smiled. I was. Then I became someone else. They talked for hours. Tyler hadn't escaped. He'd been relocated. To a facility in Alaska. Then Montana. Kept off books as a behavioral case. He'd been chemically pacified, reconditioned, and left to rot with a pension check that came from no named office. I still get one, he said. No address. Just shows up. Same envelope. Always 5 days early. He pulled one from a drawer. Unmarked. William asked, why now? Why send the USB? Tyler looked at them, voice steady. Because I saw your face, Eli. On TV. And I realized they didn't kill all of us. So maybe it's time we stop hiding. That night, they made a decision. Tyler would come forward. Eli would testify again, with him at his side. They left Montana in silence. But the moment Tyler stepped off the plane in Detroit, the world would change. 3 days later, they stood before cameras again. Eli. Tyler. William. And a banner behind them. We weren't lost. We were hidden. They stood shoulder to shoulder. 2 men once declared dead. 1 man who buried the lie. And millions watching from around the world. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a reckoning. The second testimony went further than the first. Now, Tyler Vance spoke too. He told them about the injections. The reprogramming. The voice recordings they forced him to listen to for hours, looped messages saying, you were never a soldier. You were a risk. He told them about the bunkers. The faces. The ones who didn't survive. The ones who broke. And the ones who forgot themselves to stay sane. Eli sat beside him, nodding slowly. William stood just behind, silent. Still. A pillar when the floor beneath them shifted again. The select committee voted unanimously. Operation Vulture was officially declassified. A 6,400-page report was released to the public. Of the original 23 soldiers on the Mercer list, 4 were confirmed alive, Eli, Tyler, James, and 1 other who remained anonymous. 3 were found deceased in unmarked graves. 6 were unaccounted for. 10 were still under investigation. But the real number? It might have been far higher. Because once the report hit, letters began flooding in. Emails. Photos. Military IDs. Eyewitnesses. A widow in Colorado claimed her husband had seen a man in a VA hospital with the same scar as his missing brother-in-law, in 1992. A trucker in Texas swore he picked up a hitchhiker who spoke like a Marine but didn't know the name of the president. A nurse in North Carolina remembered a patient who only answered to his Army serial number. She had written it down. It matched a presumed dead Green Beret from 1970. Hannah Greer released her final documentary episode. It opened with this line. They didn't just disappear. They were erased. But now we remember. All of them. Congress passed the Mercer-Vance Act. A law requiring annual audits of all MIA and KIA military records from 1945 to 1995. It also created the Office for Forgotten Servicemen, staffed with archivists, independent investigators, and trauma specialists. William was offered a position on the advisory board. He declined. "I'm not a politician," he said. "I'm just a man who picked up a shovel and refused to bury the truth." Eli moved into a small house near the lake. Tyler lived nearby. They went fishing sometimes. Other times, they sat in silence, watching birds they couldn't name and sunsets they couldn't stop. "Feels strange," Tyler said one evening. "What does?" Eli asked. "To have time." William visited often. They didn't talk much about the hearings anymore. Or the threats. Or the file folders they still kept locked in a drawer in the guest room. Instead, they talked about dogs. Books. And once, the fact that Eli had never learned how to use an iPhone. "I survived a POW camp, William. I won't survive Face ID." The last scene of the story came not in court, or on the news, but in a quiet chapel in upstate New York. It was a memorial. But not for a funeral. For the ones who never came back, and whose graves were never corrected. Their families gathered. Not to say goodbye. But to say, "We remember you. And we are still looking." William gave the final reading. His voice shook. Just a little. "Some men die once. Others die every time they are forgotten. Today, we give them back their names." The camera cut to Eli. Then Tyler. Then the wall of names behind them, etched into granite, 23 lines long and growing. Then to the families. The quiet tears. The folded flags. And finally, to a small inscription at the bottom of the memorial. "Truth doesn't fade. Even when it's buried."